We're going to advocate strongly for both the stablecoin bill that we've worked on with Ranking Member Maxine Waters and the fit-for-purpose regulatory framework bill that we've crafted with the House Agriculture Committee. None of our passion is diminished on that. We've got really good, I think, legislative products that came out of our committee on a strong bipartisan basis last July. We've just been delayed because of the nonsense in the House about throwing Kevin McCarthy out of the speakership. That just set us back.
This content is brought to you by Uphold, which is a great crypto platform that I've been using since 2018. Uphold has all the top cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and all the altcoins. In fact, they have 260 plus cryptocurrencies on their platform. You can also trade precious metals, stablecoins, and 37 fiat currencies. In addition, they are available in over 150 countries. And this platform is fully reserved. They do audits, so you can trust that your funds are safe. No commingling, no lending out your funds. If you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Congressman French Hill, who's a Republican out of Arkansas, and also the chairman of the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Inclusion. Congressman Hill, great to have you back on.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you.
Congressman Hill, lots to talk about, but I want to talk about the breaking news that we had yesterday, and that is Chairman Patrick McHenry announcing his retirement. I would love to get your thoughts on that. And do you see any, this impacting any of the crypto bills in the House right now?
Well, Patrick's been such a great friend and colleague for me over the past 9 years that I've served in the House. And he's been an outstanding, dynamic chairman in this Congress. And nothing shows that dynamism more, I think, than the leadership he's had for a national privacy standard and for setting out a regulatory framework that works for innovators, investors, consumers, and businesses interested in the digital asset future. So we're going to miss him. But look, he's going to be in Congress all next year. He's going to be our chairman all next year. And he's a great leader. And I'm counting on being his wingman as we try to land these digital assets improvements in our economy over the next few weeks.
So we still got him around for a while. So you anticipate no hiccups, everything, we could still, keep going and with the agenda and so forth.
Yeah, I think we're going to advocate strongly for both the stablecoin bill that we've worked on with Ranking Member Maxine Waters and the fit-for-purpose regulatory framework bill that we've crafted with the House Agriculture Committee. None of our passion is diminished on that. We've got really good, I think, legislative products that came out of our committee on a strong bipartisan basis last July. We've just been delayed because of the nonsense in the House about throwing Kevin McCarthy out of the speakership. That just set us back for making the progress that we've needed, but we're on track, and I hope we can make progress early in 2024.
Got it. That was going to be my next question. Could we get anything done before the Christmas holidays, or is this going to be a Q1 2024?
Tony, I think it's Q1 out of practicality.
Sure.
There was an effort made in early November, so way over a month ago, by Senate Democrats that they might want a couple of financial services type priorities for the National Defense Authorization Bill. This would be something like the cannabis banking bill or Elizabeth Warren's AML, BSA type provisions in and around crypto. But those didn't really come to fruition. So I don't really know that there's a vehicle to try to move stable coins or fit for purpose regulatory framework type bills in this remaining few days of the calendar year.
Sure. Now, I want to talk about the letter you and Senator Cynthia Lummis sent to the DOJ regarding Binance and Tether. Now, since then, Binance and the DOJ have formed a settlement. The CEO of Binance, CZ, is stepping down, of course, and there's been some resolution there. Tell us about that letter and as well as the situation with the Binance settlement and what your thoughts are there.
Well, look, and this is, I think, tough inside the digital assets and crypto space to have this conversation with some of our ecosystem, but it's really important. If we want a regulatory framework that works for Web3 innovation and decentralized finance, and if we want tokenized payments through the use of a privately issued stablecoin, then we've got to come together legislatively and get that passed.
Sure.
What's a barrier? A barrier to that over in the Senate is the concept of money laundering and Bank Secrecy Act provisions in and around digital assets. So that's why Cynthia and I sent that letter. It's why I convened a hearing just 2 weeks ago on the Hamas open source news reporting that somehow Hamas financed their invasion of Israel using crypto, which I would argue is not a factually accurate statement.
Yeah.
But you get my point. And so we're looking for what are the appropriate things that we can do to provide clarity and provide confidence to senators and House members who are not experts in blockchain, not experts in digital assets, or even understand potentially, the benefits of Web3 and peer-to-peer innovation, and get them comfortable that there are adequate and effective AML BSA provisions. And so Cynthia and I want to be on the front edge of asking those questions. And that's why we're having the hearings. We wrote the letter. And in practicality, perhaps the Binance arrangement will help policymakers have better understandings about this and therefore be more forthcoming at moving this legislation forward. So that's kind of my philosophical view. That's not a down in the weeds view about the exact issues, but that's my goal, is that we don't want it to be an impediment to the legislative changes that we need to have a thriving digital assets future here in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think KYC AML is certainly important, and we need to have those guardrails in place. And to your point, you don't want any open doors or things that are left unchecked, which could cause problems later down the line. Now, regarding Tether, I don't know if you can tell us a bit more about what you're worried about there. Is it simply AML, KYC, like who's, cashing in to get Tether USDT? And are they using KYC AML? Is that the concern there?
I think it is generally, and again, we're trying to be out on offense in order to play a good defense, really, by demonstrating to people their obligations. And I've tried to say this from the very beginning, ever since we've considered improving a framework and getting out of this terrible situation we're in now, which is we're going to just sue people and intimidate people and accuse people of being involved in criminal activity who are actually trying to do right and obey U.S. laws. So we're looking for those gaps on the Know Your Customer rules or AML BSA. And I've said from the very beginning, look, here's how we do it in the analog world. Let's apply those same concepts to the digital world out on the blockchain in a tokenized payment environment. And this gets into wallets and mixers and wash sales, and the charges. And so the more we bring clarity to that, the better off we'll be to try to move this ecosystem forward and have the regulatory and legal protections that we need for the dynamic, I think, opportunity that's there.
Hi, everyone. Pardon the interruption. I'm Tony Edward, the founder and host of the Thinking Crypto podcast. I have a huge favor to ask you. If you haven't subscribed as yet on YouTube or the podcast platforms, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, hit the notification bell on the YouTube platform, and on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and review. It supports the podcast. It allows me to bring great quality content to you. Thank you for your support, and I'll let you get back to the content. Absolutely. The challenge, though, it has been, and by the way, shout out to you and Senator Cynthia Lummis and the other folks who are trying to find a balanced approach here. But you have folks like Senator Elizabeth Warren, worked with the Wall Street Journal, I think, spreading some misinformation. How do we how do we balance that out, right? Because she's going on the extreme end of the things of like, oh, so crypto is the root of all evil, right? when bad actors use any medium of exchange, right? Whether it be cash, whatever it is, we have to stop the bad actors, put the guardrails in place. How do we counteract Senator Elizabeth Warren's anti-crypto agenda?
Well, I think, first of all, using facts that if you want to interdict ransomware attacks and wallet thefts by North Korean cyber criminals, you're not going to enhance that by having a good, vibrant, well-regulated, well-regarded crypto industry in the United States. The two things they don't have anything to do with each other.
Yeah.
She presumes that if someone is interested in owning digital assets in their brokerage account here in the United States or in a custodial account at a bank or a trust company, that somehow that's aiding illegal crypto activity internationally to build the North Korean ICBM system. Look, I think we're all concerned about North Korea. North Korea's radical military behavior, their nuclear development, their violation of all sanctions, and as you point out, all sanctions, illegal oil, C2C transfers, the use of cash, the use of ransomware. And our intelligence community, our defense community, our financial intelligence community at Treasury, gosh, they're on the hunt every day to shut that stuff down. But it is not connected to rather a good actor here who wants to innovate and bring a digital assets product to benefit American consumers or investors to the market, that somehow those are connected. We can do both these things. And that's why I think it gets confused. In Hamas, look, their taxation of business, their hawala system, their manipulation of the charities in the United States, many, many, many sources of revenue, including hundreds of millions of dollars from Iran, dwarf any activity that has to do with a tokenized payment. And as you've seen in open source reporting, people know that if they do a transaction on a blockchain, there's a track. Yep. That's the whole point.
Exactly.
And so I'd say the remaining issues, if you take that as a philosophical point of view, is how do we get her comfortable with the idea of a self-custody wallet? How do we get her comfortable with pseudo-anonymity, but not permanent anonymity or illegal anonymity? And what I've argued is, look, if you break those laws, you are a criminal, or you have violated a civil statute in some cases. You're a violator of the rules. And if we have a system here that attracts capital and innovation here, it's much better to cut down on that kind of effort around the world. So we have some education to do, and we have some work to do, but I'm not going to give up till we get it right. And just this past week, Jim Himes and I spoke at the Blockchain Association, and we made that clear on a bipartisan basis that we can get these compliance rules right, and we can move forward with the innovation that will result.
Speaking of bipartisan support, obviously both Senator Cynthia Lummis and Kristen Gillibrand have introduced their own crypto regulation bill. Obviously, you and Senator Lummis collaborate on the letter about Binance and Tether. So let's say the two bills make it out of the House, right? Q1, and they move to the Senate. Do you see Senator Lummis and Gillibrand helping to champion these bills and push them through?
Yeah, I think we'll be cooperative. We took our approach. We worked on it really hard. We took a different approach, both on stable coins and on the regulatory framework, slightly than Gillibrand Lummis from the prior Congress and this current Congress. But we're all on the same page of trying to find consensus. And so there are two great advocates in the Senate. And I think Debbie Stabenow and John Bozeman over in the Senate Agriculture Committee will also be constructive partners as we look at the changes that have to happen in their committee as well. But, you know, I would love it if senators would introduce our two House bills over there. That'd be terrific. I think that would help the cause even more. But I do count on those leaders in the Senate being helpful once we pass the bills here in the House.
Now I want to talk about what's been going on with the SEC and in the courts. The SEC has taken some big losses against Ripple, with, just scathing comments coming from these judges about the SEC's behavior and the way they conduct business. One recently with Debtbox and that situation where the judge said threatening to sanction SEC lawyers. Grayscale, judges saying the SEC acted arbitrary and capricious. I know you and the folks in the House Financial Services Committee have been working on holding Gary Gensler accountable, keeping the SEC in check. Can you tell us what's on the agenda for that? And, maybe it's in 2024. Are there other hearings? Are there other things or bills and things that you're going to try to push through to keep the SEC in check?
Well, each of our subcommittees on House Financial Services Committee, many of them end up touching the broad, deep regulatory assault that Gary Gensler has on the U.S. capital markets right now. Our Capital Markets Committee, Ann Wagner from St. Louis chairs that subcommittee. She's on it. Bill Huizenga, who is from Michigan, chairs our Oversight Committee, and he's on it, particularly as it relates to looking at maybe malfeasance in how the SEC handled FTX. We want to know all the emails, all the letters, all the phone conversations there. And also on ESG and that regulatory agenda. And then, of course, on digital assets, we're working mightily to point out to Chairman Gensler, look, we're just arguing one thing, which is the existing law, the existing body of regulations does not fit digital asset projects. And therefore, we've designed our bill to be fit for purpose. It doesn't cut the SEC out at all. In fact, it directs the SEC and their commodities companion, the CFTC, exactly what to do. They should be grateful. We should be getting thank you notes from the SEC and the CFTC on the approach that we're taking. And we have gotten technical assistance from the SEC staff. My hat's off to them for that. But we're not getting the kind of support and leadership that I would expect from Chairman Gensler, who has on his resume the teaching of blockchain and all the positive attributes that it offers.
Now, with that said, a lot of folks are waiting for the SEC to approve a Bitcoin spot ETF or multiple Bitcoin spot ETFs. We've seen some folks in Congress bring this up to Chair Gensler. Are you anticipating an approval maybe in Q1 2024 or possibly this month?
I think it is possible now because, as you say, of the court track record, that the commission is now losing these cases and being declared arbitrary and capricious. No staffer in the legal department at the SEC wants to be accused of being arbitrary and capricious by a federal judge. And by the progress that we've made on a bipartisan basis in the House and Senate in talking about these issues and actually considering how best to do it. So I think it is possible that they will approve one or more of these ETFs. And I think there are small institutions, large institutions, and consumers that are eager for that advancement. That in and of itself ought to provide more regulation, more transparency, and more oversight to this market. And I would think that's something that Chairman Gensler would support.
Now, I want to talk about presidential candidates, and many of them seem to be in favor of crypto and allowing innovation to flourish here in the United States. Many have put out their ideas and how they would regulate crypto if they were to become president. And it's just a vast change from maybe, let's say, the current administration, the Biden administration, which has times seemed to be anti-crypto, and that could be as a result of Elizabeth Warren, I'm not sure. But, what are your thoughts on, and it's both on the Democrat and Republican side, these folks coming up with their ideas, and it seems like crypto is going to be a ballot issue moving forward. Not the top, but, one of the items.
Yeah. Well, look, we should all be for innovation in America. We know that America has the best property rights, the best rule of law, the best compliance, the most liquid, transparent markets in the world. And so why wouldn't we want that as a goal for Web3, blockchain related ideas for consumers, investors, and innovators? I think we should. I thought President Biden's executive order had parts of it that were trying to, head us in a direction. He might have said, let's do it prudently. Let's make sure we do it right. Let's make sure we know the costs and benefits, the pros and cons. I got all that. That's perfectly fine. But then when you look at the actual actions of the administration, they're pretty hostile to it. We had a hearing yesterday in House Financial Services Committee with the innovation offices at the bank regulators. That's not an oxymoron. There are innovation offices at the bank regulators. And we question them about the novel activities rule, which has put a chilling effect on banks in this space. We have questioned at previous hearings the bad rule by the SEC on custody that really is too broad and goes against years and years and years of common law and state law on custody. And we've already talked about the SEC and the fact that the CFTC needs some additional legal authority. So we have an executive order that I would say we're in the spirit of trying to find bipartisan consensus on how best to preserve America's leadership in the world on this topic. But when you get to the actual regulators, they are hostile. And that's why Congress is stepping in here, I think, in order to provide that leadership. So I hope Joe Biden, will see that distinction. And I think you're right. I think there's some members in the Democratic Party inside his circle that are very, very hostile. And every single thing and aspect around crypto is a criminal enterprise. Others are more enlightened. On the Republican side, here's my theme for the Republicans. They're open to innovation, capital market expansion, led by the private sector. They don't all understand blockchain, Web3, peer-to-peer, decentralized finance. They just don't. But the one thing I think they all agree on is they don't want a government-driven, government-designed central bank digital currency run by the Fed, where every customer has to have an account at the Fed, and it could be some sort of a violation of individual privacy surveillance state. So I know that's a common thread by Republican candidates. And we have a bill here in Congress. We have several bills, actually, including a bipartisan bill that says the government may not issue a central bank digital currency at retail to consumers without an act and direction of Congress.
So, Congressman, with that said, you have all these competitors in the world and other superpowers who are building their CBDCs. How do we stay competitive in that environment where they, for example, China, they're going to other countries, lending money to build up infrastructure, and they could inject a digital yuan there. I see that as a potential threat to the US dollar reserve currency. So how does the US remain competitive? Is it a private sector stablecoin, or is it we can still do a CBDC, but we do it right?
Yeah, two comments. One, Tony, I think your instinct is right. I think we walk before we run, which means we have a regulatory framework. We don't confuse people, jail people, or misalign interest in the private sector trying to innovate. So let's get a regulatory framework, and let's get a dollar-based, a well-regulated dollar-based stablecoin regime where both internationally for remittance payments or for other kinds of transactions that we let the private sector experiment with a blockchain ledger with payments being made internationally or under wholesale or retail circumstances using a dollar-based stablecoin. That will inform us, in my opinion, about how best one might consider a central bank dollar, a tokenized dollar, and do it in the right way, as you say, which is not government driven and not a surveillance state. But right now, politically, I think that's a hot potato. I don't think it should be done. I think it would be premature. I don't think the Chinese pitch is very attractive, and a lot of people are regretting being associated with Chinese credit or Chinese technology in countries. So, but we should have as a goal things that enhance the US dollar and the US dollar primacy, because that really helps not only our country, but our allied interest around the world. And we don't want to see that diluted by bad actors.
Yeah. And well, I think 2024, I'm hoping that we can get a lot of these things ironed out. I know it's a work in progress, excuse me. So are you optimistic 2024? Final question here, that we can get these bills out the House and make them to get it up to the Senate. I know the election's coming up, so I don't know what's going to happen from a president's standpoint, but at least get it through to the Senate.
I'm optimistic that we can make progress in the House on both stablecoins and our fit-for-purpose regulatory framework. And if we do that, and if it's bipartisan, I think that sends a major message to come to the table and work with us over in the Senate. And having seen the constructive conversations I've had with officials at the Federal Reserve and at the Treasury, I bet we could find a way to find a path to get a bill signed into law by President Biden. This shouldn't be political. This should be a generational opportunity, like we had in the 1990s, to see great advances in the internet and in telecommunications in the U.S. This should be a bipartisan opportunity in a safe, sound, effective way to have a Web3 future and tokenized dollar payments on a blockchain, and make that a positive thing, not a negative thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Congressman French Hill, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Tony, great to be with you.
Thank you.